The 2022 WRX is selling surprisingly well, and no one's talking about it. We saw lots of common news outlets cover the lack of sales for the 2022 WRX when it was first released. People were quoting, it's down 90%. We're quoting all these things basically saying that the new WRX, the 2022 WRX, isn't selling well. Subaru wasn't doing well with it. It wasn't hitting its numbers. It wasn't doing well in the market. And in today's video, I've got all the sales numbers. So we're gonna take a look at it, and I can report to you that the 2022 WRX is doing pretty well. I mean, it's not outpacing just yet, but considering this year, the recession, a new model change, supply chain shortages, and a few other things, we're gonna talk about all this clickbait that a lot of common and large news companies covered and what they didn't talk about, and we're just gonna look and compare the numbers. So here we're looking at a table that shows the monthly US sales of Subaru WRXs. This is showing 2016 through 2021. That's showing the old generation, the VA generation, and 2022 we're looking at the VB generation. Now, if you follow January on the 2021, you can see that we had a strong January and we paced up. You know, we went from 1555 up to 1700 to 2200 to 3100 to 3100, and their peak sales were from March through May, and then it began to slow down as we actually experienced some market tightening. So we still had a good October, but you can see in November of 2021, we had a weak month, and even in December, just 2,000 sales, it wasn't that great. Now, this is where it becomes contentious. In 2022, in January, we only had 341 sales. That's all the pre-orders. And in February, we only had 31 sales. Now, this is where every news outlet began to cover the fact that the 2022 WRX was not selling. By March, we only had 204 sales, and news outlets were saying that the 2022 WRX was the biggest flop in the world. What wasn't being covered was the fact that these cars were just stuck in shipping. They weren't hitting the market. People were just not getting them. That, for whatever reason, whether it was clickbait, whether it was coverage, whatever it was, these cars were produced, right? They were just in transit. Now we see April 1497, May was strong, it dipped a little bit in June, July was good again, August was good. We started to dip in September and October. November is a little bit worse. We don't have our December numbers now. Now, you might notice that these numbers are still slightly below some of the better numbers for the VA generation in their respective months. But what we have is fairly unique here. We have what is called a recession. Now, you might say COVID caused a recession, but if you actually look at consumer buying habits and spending habits, during COVID, people bought new cars. They had more money. And you'd be surprised, I can tell you from the aftermarket parts side of things, the aftermarket part sales during COVID, where everyone was losing their jobs and you think there wouldn't be sales, was absolute madness. People were spending more money than they had ever spent. And I can tell you that having worked for one and owned one, right? Sales were just crazy. So what we're seeing right now in 2022 are still fairly competitive sales, and people don't have money like they did before. So with that, we can make a comfortable statement that not only is the 2022 WRX now selling near average for the other generations, it's doing quite well for a time where people just aren't buying cars. And it's not just the WRX. If you look at just Subaru sales and sales of new cars across the industry, these cars just aren't selling like they were. Subaru, in fact, has certain models that are down as much as 40 or 50% year-to-date sales. Now, the WRX is in that same boat, but that's because in January, February, and March, there literally just were not WRXs available. If there were, we could probably potentially have said that there would have been 3,000 to 5,000 total sales between those 3 months as a conservative number, especially with a full model change. Why am I making this video? You might ask, this is stupid. It is what it is. It is, you know, nothing's going to change. I make this video because people are still recirculating these articles where they're saying that the 2022 WRX is a flop. Do I love the car? It's not my favorite. The VA generation is definitely my preference. I still like the VB. I still think it looks okay, and maybe one day I'll have one, and maybe I'm looking for one right now. I just don't know. But I do want to come out with a statement that when people say sales are 90% down, they're not, right? This car is selling. When people are making financial decisions, decisions about what they do with their car, because the car game is a financial game, and I see people making financial decisions because they think that the 2022 WRXs are just sitting on lots, nobody's buying them, they're not selling, the numbers are low. It's just not the case. So I think the biggest statement here is a WRX, at least a VA WRX, probably not an investment. It's not going to hold the value like it used to. The STI, we'll talk about that another time. I know that you guys are sick of me talking about the value, but I just wanted to kind of myth bust these articles, give you guys the latest and greatest about what's actually happening with the market and the WRXs, and that, you know, this is positive feedback to Subaru. So all of us that are demanding changes and hoping for change because we're like, the VA was the better option and people hate the VB. The numbers don't agree with that. And when you think about the cost increase of the cars, you know, when you think about like a base WRX in 2015 or 2016 cost like, you could get them at a dealer for like $22,900 brand new. And the fact now that they're like that same equivalent would be like $31,000 at most dealers right now. Subaru's making more money on these cars than they ever have. You know, their costs are higher, but their total revenue generation is far outpacing any of the other months. Even with slightly lower numbers, they're far outpacing the total revenue generation for these cars. So the numbers don't lie. Subaru's making money. For all of us that are a little bit spoiled sports, and I can fall into that grouping myself because at first I was like, you know, they're just not selling. People aren't going to want them. It's not the case. So, you know, this is the future of the WRX. This is what we're going to see for at least the next 5 to 7 years because that's what Subaru does for their life cycle of their cars. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed looking at some numbers. I certainly, you know, I like to look at numbers and look at the stuff, and I'm glad I found this because, again, I didn't realize how well they were actually selling. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.